welcome Professor Lina Restrepo-Plaza, who is a professor of economics at the Social Sciences faculty at the Universidad Europea de Valencia and director of the research group e-Socials. So thank you so much, Professor Restrepo-Plaza, for joining us, and please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Paulus, and thank you everyone for having me. It is an honest pleasure to have the chance to talk to this amazing audience and get your feedback. I'm sharing, yeah, my screen. Brilliant. So what I'm about to present today, it's been quite a journey of a paper that started, I would say a few years back, when Professor Enrique Pataz and myself tried to understand a little bit of the effect of the exposure to conflict on people's behavior. We were interested on the effect on individual preferences, but also social preferences. And so we published 2 or 3 papers on that matter. But now that we go back to it, and now that we are focusing more and more on discrimination and other dynamics, differentiating dynamics, so we believed that that paper by the time, or that information we collected by the time, is given us also a methodological insights. So this paper is the idea, what we have with this paper is to come up with some methodological approach to be able to decompose both belief-based and taste-based discrimination, which I will explain more in depth in a few slides. So basically the motivation for this is simple. Well, we know what the burden of discrimination must be. We know that, for instance, in America, North America, women earn 82% for every dollar that every man earns. And that's data from 2022, but also in 2023, we know, we found that Latinos in the US earn 76 cents and Afros 83 cents per every dollar earned by a white American. So that is telling you a little bit about what discrimination looks like in North America. But also we see discrimination is ubiquitous, so you can find it everywhere, you know. So even in Colombia, which is quite an heterogeneous country, race-wise at least, we see that Venezuelans and Colombians exhibit different patterns of payments. For instance, we see that 75% of Venezuelans earn even less than a minimum wage. And that is true for 43% of Colombians, which is also a lot, but the difference is more than 20% points. So that is also telling you how we have to approach the discrimination problem from different angles, and it is a topic that is always useful to look at. What is discrimination? Well, Professor Fataz already mentioned some conceptualization, so I'm not going to focus that much on it. But I just want to say that from the anthropological discipline and also from sociology, what we see is, of course, a more social kind of approach to what discrimination is. And from the anthropology, we see that it is more connected to what cultural beliefs and values are in practice in a particular environment. But when we see it from the sociological point of view, we see that that is more connected to statuses and memberships to particular groups. The psychological and economic perspective is more like an individualistic approach to discrimination. So from psychology, discrimination comes from different perceptions, prejudices, stereotypes, and attitudes that people have because of their personality traits, because of their history, because of the cognitive biases and all the psychological conflicts they might be enduring. And from the economics perspective, what we do is basically to say, well, discrimination is, of course, also an unequal treatment, as the other three disciplines say. But what in economics we do is to differentiate between two types of discrimination, which one is taste-based discrimination, also called preference-based discrimination, and the other one is statistical-based discrimination or belief-based discrimination. So the former, the taste-based one, as the name doesn't lie. So the name is saying, look, sometimes we exhibit a different behavior with other persons just because we can't spot on what the reason is. It's just that there is something we don't like about that person. And that is quite unique, and that is quite that comes from our prejudices, you know. And the statistical or belief-based discrimination is saying, well, probably we behave differently, not because we do not like the other person or the other group or the group that the person belongs to. It's perhaps just the fact that we hold some beliefs that make us think that person is probably not a good fit. That person probably doesn't understand the interaction we are having. That person is not her productivity is quite low just because of the group that person belongs to. So those beliefs make us behave differently. And so we would like to focus on that, on the economic side of discrimination, the way we in economics make sense of it. And the way is, and we would like to ask, how do we account for the differences between taste and belief-based discrimination? And we did, normally what it has done, not only in economics, but also in psychology, is that a person with certain characteristics is presented with a history, that person does, what person wants to do, and also some sort of information regarding that person's background, something that signals his or her productivity, perhaps, is given in order to reduce the effect of beliefs. So if you see a person without that information, you might behave differently with her, just because you probably don't like the way she looks, or you know, or because you have some beliefs about that person. But once you get the beliefs sorted through extra information that is given, so that extra information should fill the gap of all the doubts you have. So that is how it's normally done. You can do it through images, through vignettes, through comics, through videos. And what problem we found, even myself in a different paper, is that sometimes that information is quite sensitive to the face, to the voice of the person, the context where the person is interacting with you. So all those variables become a bit noisy. So in the end, it's very difficult to subtract the beliefs from the equation. And so there is much noise, that the one we like, in order for us to disentangle preference-based and belief-based discrimination. So we say, well, why don't we do something we are more or less good at, which is use economic incentives. So we used this approach, and we used a very canonical game there is in behavioral sciences and experimental economics, called the public goods game. Basically, it is a type of game in which there are two people interacting, and there is some sort of, you need some cooperation and trust among them in order for them to build a relationship. But we use economics incentives, so we use that interaction. That interaction has to be economically salient. So how does it look like? Let's imagine this person is called Paulus. We give Paulus $15 and the opportunity to contribute to a joint account with a stranger. He doesn't know who he's going to talk to or who is not going to contribute to. The interaction is completely anonymous. But the only piece of information Paulus has is that the other person might belong to either of these three groups. It could be a victim of conflict, a person who is not victim, that has not been directly affected by conflict, or that person is an ex-combatant. Yes? So that is the piece of information Paulus has, and those groups come because of the subject pool we work on with, which I will describe better soon. And then Paulus knows that these are the instructions. As he doesn't know the other person he's going to interact with, the other person doesn't know Paulus either. It's completely anonymous. And they both know that for each $5, well, we play the game with Colombian pesos, of course, but for each $5 there is in the public account, in the joint account, my team will put $2 extra, and the money collected in the joint account will be evenly distributed among Paulus and the other person. So that means that if both Paulus and the other person contributes the $15 that I gave to each of them, in the joint account was going to be $30. And my team will give 12 extra dollars, 2 per each $5, So in total, we're gonna collect $42, and those $42 are evenly distributed among the two, 21 for Paulus and 21 for the other person, yes? Sounds beautiful. The problem is that Paulus' intentions might grow greedier, and the greedier Paulus becomes, the less he wants to contribute to the group account. So if he doesn't contribute at all, the only money that will go through the public to the joint account is going to be the other person's money, only $15. So my team will give $6 extra. In total, we will collect 21. When we evenly distribute those 21, the other person receives 10.5, whereas Paulus got 25, the 15 he never contributed that he kept in his pocket, plus the 10.5 coming from the group account. The problem is if that everybody thinks alike, like Paulus, in the end, nobody will contribute to the joint account. And that and nobody will benefit from the system that I've created of giving more money because of their contributions. This is a way to represent a public goods game, because in public goods, people are contributed for something that will benefit everybody, and we cannot exclude people from benefiting from it. Like taxes, we all have to pay taxes. In the end, taxes are useful to create public goods, roads, universities, hospitals, and we all benefit from that. And we cannot exclude anybody for not paying their taxes. Yeah. So this is just some mimification of that situation. In the end, what is going on is there is a social dilemma that Paulus is facing to. There is a tension in Paulus saying, should I contribute to the group account? But I don't know if the other person will contribute to. I don't want to be the fool that is giving all the money, whereas the other is just going to take advantage of it. But I also don't want to be the miserable person who will keep all the money for himself, whereas the other person is contributing a lot. Yeah. So those beliefs that I have regarding the other person, because this decision is made in private simultaneously, and you do not know what the other person is doing, regards all the beliefs I may have about such person, yeah? So we run this game, and we do two variations that I will present in a bit. At SENA, which is a large public vocational training organization in Colombia that provides vocational training for vulnerable groups, people that are very poor. But after the peace process, they started giving special attention for victims and ex-combatants that were willing to take some vocational training. Yeah. So in the end, there were actual training programs that held both help victims, non-victims, and ex-combatants. But keep in mind that those non-victims have also the same economic background that the others. They were all in SENA, they are all vulnerable populations. Yeah. We collected 193 observations, and the great majority of them were non-victims, for almost 37% victims. We have very little ex-combatants, and because of that, I'm not going to use that data for the results, you know, but the fact that there were ex-combatants in the study made it salient and possible for, of course, for people to know that there is a possibility, a probability that they will be actually interacting with an ex-combatant in the game, the public goods game I just presented to you. So we had two tasks. The first one was the same public goods game I presented before, when police have to make the call, how much to contribute to the joint account without knowing anything about the other person besides the potential group that person can belong to. So police have to make a contingent decision if the other person was a victim, an ex-combatant, or a non-victim. And also, we played exactly the same game with the same people, but we told them, look, now you know a little bit more. You do not only know the group, potential group that person is going to belong to, but you can make a contingent decision for every potential amount the other person can contribute. So you can say, if the other person contributes 0, how much you will contribute? If the other person contributes 5, how much will you contribute? And so on and so forth. So this is basically how it looks like. Let's imagine the police is a victim and police is interacting with, on the top, here we have got an in-group, which will be another victim. And let's imagine the police with the in-group contributes $15. But when he contributes, when he's interacting with somebody from another group, a non-victim or an ex-combatant, he only sends $5 to that joint account. Why that is happening? So our idea is that is maybe because there are beliefs regarding what the other person is going to do. And those beliefs depend on the group that person belongs. Yeah. So but also Paul's decision might also be affected by his taste. He probably doesn't like that sweater of the other person. That Paul's probably dislike the other group. So we want to disentangle that effect. So we claim that differences in conditional cooperation is when I contribute, when I disclaim how much I want to contribute to the joint account for each particular amount of money that the other person is contributing to. And so we believe that those differences in conditional cooperation are basically explained by preference-based discrimination. Why? Because there are no beliefs. I exactly know how much the other person is going to contribute. So if I behave differently with people from the same group as me than with other people, it's just because it's something related with preferences. There are no beliefs playing a role whatsoever. And we also got this idea that differences in unconditional cooperation, when I just say, well, I don't know how much the other person is going to contribute, I only have the idea that that person could be a victim, a non-victim, or an ex-combatant, and I make a decision for the three options. And so, but when I make that decision, I don't know how much the other person will contribute, only the group. So in that situation, there must be the two discrimination types. It could be preference-based discrimination, but also belief-based, because I have no idea about the other person's intentions on how much to contribute. So this is how taste-based discrimination will look like. We're gonna capture. So we will gonna look at a conditional cooperation for Paulus to his in-group and to his out-group, and the difference will let us know about his taste-based discrimination. There are not other reasons why, if these two guys are contributing 5, and I know that, why I am behaving differently. Doesn't make much sense, except for taste-based discrimination. And if there is belief-based discrimination, we have no idea how much the other one is going to contribute, because we are using the unconditional cooperation game when I don't know the contribution of the others. So what we are going to do then is that we are going to compute the implicit beliefs of Paulus regarding the other group. What Paulus thinks the others are going to do, we can compute that. And then we will use those beliefs, and we extrapolate them to the conditional cooperation task. And then we see, okay, when that person contributes my implicit belief, I will give that person that money. And then I will compute the difference between what I contribute with my in-group and my out-group, and then I can make sense of the belief-based discrimination. And you might be asking, and I'm about to finish, Polish, why don't we just ask people how much they want to how much the beliefs about the other person? Well, we don't do it because there is so much social desirability bias. They would probably just going to lie to us. And there is also the fact of the cognitive dissonance, that people don't like to contradict themselves. So they will just rationalize their answers, and we don't want that either. And what we found is we found evidence for taste-based discrimination. What you are seeing here is how much victims and non-victims discriminate the other groups. On the right, you see ex-combatants. You can see they both discriminate ex-combatants, but non-victims discriminate more. On the right, you see how victims discriminate non-victims, and that is below 0. So that is positive discrimination. And whereas non-victims actually discriminate victims, and that is of normal discrimination size. Yeah. Unconditional cooperation, we already computed the implicit beliefs, but we haven't yet done the computation to calculate the belief-based discrimination. That is something we are going to work on during this month. But what we can just tell you now is how the unconditional discrimination looks like. So we said we can see how ex-combatants are discriminated against by both victims and non-victims. And people that are non-ex-combatants are also discriminated, but quite less. For instance, the gray ones are non-victims that are discriminated very little, actually positively discriminated by victims. Whereas the blue ones are the victims that are actually discriminated by non-victims. So that's it. That's what we are going to do. We are trying to make sense using this process to disentangle the two discriminations. And we are really looking forward to hear your comments and to improve the way perhaps we are approaching, the way we disentangle the beliefs-based and taste-based discrimination. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Yes, we have some time for questions. Yes, Sadi.
Thank you very much. And this is a sort of very smart improvement of the Tashville experiment and so it's a very nice way to try to it connects also what Enrique has been doing in terms of understanding better the nature of prejudice. I was wondering, you're using here a very interesting task because it enables measurement of differences, so you can mathematize these things. And how much this kind of discrimination or prejudice that we could have towards others probably depend upon the task. It's interesting here that a task that has nothing to do with what could happen in terms of trust, for example, in terms of violence, which would be at stake here, or resilience, or can still be found. So my first question is, do you think you could adapt this to different type of tasks that would be more related to the kind of discrimination that people make? And also, I was wondering here again, you say we don't ask people because of desirability bias, blah, blah, but perhaps there would be still something to extract about the representations behind these things, right? So I think we always gain something from qualitative, even if it's biases, we will learn maybe about what they think is acceptable as an argument, what they think isn't. And finally, but that's probably for future research, and to connect with what we saw this morning, this might be, I mean, trust is a repeated game, right? And so would there be any change if, for example, when you play with the others, say you play with and that they always, like in the prisoner's dilemma, I mean, if they always collaborate, is this enough to change, and to what degree? So how strong is the prejudice based that it could not be changed by actual experience? And maybe that could be a way to measure how resilient is that prejudice or discrimination.
This is three really good comments and questions. Very thank you, Sally, because that is it's always, at least to me, giving me ideas on how to move forward for other papers coming in the future. So regarding the task, actually, I believe so. I think depending on the task, we might get different results, but this task is good for us just to disentangle and the two dimensions of discrimination. That is why this task helps us a lot. Another task that might help with that, the same purpose. And I think I would say that any task that allows you to have both one unconditional decision without much information, and another one that got the possibility of making contingent decisions, like for instance, a trust game, or ultimatum game. Those kinds of games, I think, will also be adaptable for the purpose. I believe there could be some differences, but I think I don't know. I have to look at it. I actually have another paper in which I do a dictator game, which is framed as a crowdfunding campaign. I present people of a business project. I don't present it. Actually, an actual victim presents her business project to an audience in a video, and that person says, "Look, well, this is my story. I used to live in that part of the country, and I was forced displaced 3 years ago, and now I'm working with this, and that, and I'm looking to collect money for this." And there was an ex-combatant doing the same thing. And also say, well, I was working, I was in the guerrillas until 2 years ago. Now I'm in the reintegration process and I'm studying in Sena and I'm doing this project and I'm collecting money for the project, yeah. And we made variations of the video with more information regarding the guys to reduce the belief-based discrimination. And we find very little evidence of differences between this belief-based and taste-based discrimination. That is true. So we find, but that would be different in here, because in here we find discrimination. In that paper, we don't find much discrimination, actually. So yes, the task has an effect, but because it depends on how close the person feels about the result of the task. And also, yes, beliefs. I promise if I run another similar project in the future in person, I will ask for their beliefs. We collected some beliefs, though. Don't get me wrong. We collected beliefs about what they think other people will contribute to the joint account if interacting with a victim. That we all asked. But we didn't ask, hey, how much you think the other victim is going to contribute, which is something we didn't do. And also, yes, trust is a repeated game, and I think it's worth trying doing the same thing in different rounds. Meaning different rounds could be running, I don't know, perhaps if we are doing like a lab in the field kind of experiment, running at least every month and see if the gap closes down. That would be really nice and to see, and I think it's an effort worth doing. Thank you.
Great. Yes, Raluca.
Thank you very much. It was really fascinating. I want to ask methodological questions. I only have one question, like how unpacking this kind or these two different types of discrimination can be used for, let's say, improving anti-discriminatory behaviors. So probably your project doesn't deal with this, but I was wondering if you reflected also on how unpacking this could ameliorate anti-discriminatory behaviors.
Yeah, well, the potential for behavioral public policy or behavioral interventions, I think, is big. I mean, when we find, if we were to find that the only reason why people are behaving differently with others is because they hold unreasonable beliefs about what the other person is going to do, that is easily sorted, because then you can just update their beliefs through informational campaigns, letting them know what actually the other person is, what the person normally does, how much that person contributes to her environment, yeah, or her society. But if you find that that discrimination is mainly driven by taste-based discrimination, that is is trickier, yeah, because that means that there is something within your norms and your culture that just dislikes the other person's group, and that is more difficult to move, but it's not impossible. There are interventions, and if you learn about what is driving the discrimination in your context, if you learn that it is taste-based, there are for instance, some interventions based on contact that have shown being effective. So if you put people in contact through Sena, is something that Sena, the institution I work with, does, because they put them together as classmates, you know. And I don't know if they've done some studies on defect, like at least qualitative studies, which should be, I think they have done it, to actually say how much they come together and they reduce prejudice among to each other because they were working together, yeah? But we found that contact reduces prejudices and stereotypes. That is another paper I hopefully gonna publish soon, and on that domain. So yes, it's useful because then you know what you can do to reduce the gap, behavioral gap between groups. Thank you.
Yes, Sally.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had another question because in another presentation, I think you mentioned that both the victims and the perpetrators seem to be more collaborative and open to discussion and things like that than the bystanders. Like if having been exposed to very difficult situations sort of opened the mind to more possibilities and more flexibility. Is that correct? Or
yes, sir. That is what we get. May I show you the screen? Just 30 seconds. It will be, yeah, here you go. This is exactly the picture that tells you that. Well, there are two. This is one. So we have two bars, victims and non-victims. Victims have been directly affected by conflict, and the others have not. And then you see how much these guys discriminate. On the left, you see the first bar is how much victims discriminate non-victims. And you can see no discrimination at all. It's actually positive discrimination. They actually behave better with them than with their own group. And when you see how non-victims behave or discriminate victims, which is the second bar, this one over here, then you can see the discrimination is significantly different. Then let's move to ex-combatants, the last two bars, yeah? Victims and non-victims, they both discriminate ex-combatants, but non-victims, which have not been directly affected by conflict, they discriminate far more than victims. That's what I said before, that the exposure to conflict tend to make victims more resilient and more cooperative with ex-combatants. Mm-hmm.
yeah, that is a sort of very surprising and perhaps this result is giving hope in a way, but
yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you very much.
I have a short question. You said that you won't use the data concerning how ex-combatants are discriminating because you had a very few number of ex-combatants.
Only 7.
But just out of curiosity, what is happening with those 7? Is there, okay, it's only 7 people, so you cannot make a trend, but still.
What I looked at that data like a long time ago, but I remember, what I remember is they do not discriminate anybody. Like they behave with the others just as they behave with themselves. But still, we have so little data, so probably it's just noise.
All right. So yes, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Lina, and thank you so much,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.